Hello, everyone. I'm Sergio Ammirata. I'm Chief Scientist at Cypredius. We make equipment, software, and environments for professional video streaming. Today, I'm going to talk about how to secure content. But to be clear, this is not a talk about DRMs. Just wait and see. Right? So, some of you are already thinking this might be a good time to slip out and get a snack or another coffee, because we all know about security, right? We always check that we have AES encryption in our networks. We use RIST or SRT. One of them even has the word secure in the name. We have our material wrapped in an industry standard DRM. We're good. We move on, right? Well, I'm here to plant some seeds in your minds to help you be absolutely certain that you have covered all the bases, all of them, because any security weak spot renders the whole network open to the bad guys. So let me start by explaining that the chances are you do need to take another think about security in your infrastructure. Just like last year, the World Economic Forum at Davos saw a presentation on the outlook for global security. It found that the number of organizations with a minimum level of cyber resilience decreased by 30%. So let me say this again, 30% fewer businesses and organizations had even a minimum level of cybersecurity than the year before. Now, that figure is a little bit skewed because it's really an average of a more complex curve. Larger organizations are actually very good in cyber resilience, but small and medium enterprises are getting much, much worse at security. Maybe in a tough economic climate, you have to focus your resources and get the product out the door, and security becomes a second thought. And as you know, most media businesses are small and medium enterprises. So that gives you an idea what's going on out there. So why should we care about security? Why is it important in streaming video to have a secure environment? Well, first and most obvious is that you have probably paid a lot of money for the intellectual property rights to the content. And you really don't want anyone pirating and stealing your revenue. It might maybe be work in progress that you want to keep on the wraps until the movie on series is ready for release. Maybe it's a live sports that you only have clearance to show it in specific territories. If your content leaks, then the people that own the rights in those territories will be quite angry with you and call for the very expensive lawyers, right? Now, piracy is only one of the problems. There are also cyber terrorists about, and they might want to hold you for extortion. Imagine sitting in the control room as the final seconds tick down to the Super Bowl or the Olympic 100 meters finals or the Soccer World Cup, and suddenly all your screens in front of you show a man with a mask suggesting that a couple of million in Bitcoin will get you back on air, right? Worse, imagine that the same bad actor is a terrorist group or an unfriendly nation, and instead of asking for ransom, they just replace your content with a stream on their own, and they push propaganda to your audience. That is very bad for your brand reputation, and may well get you, an uncomfortable meeting with a government agency, right? So finally, breaking into a video stream, why is it important? If they break into a video stream, that may give the hacker a route into the rest of your infrastructure. It's not only your video stream that's compromised now, it's your entire network, your personal files, your client's credit cards, your business plans. They could all be in the open if they hack one of the video engines within your infrastructure. So clearly, security is always on the top of your checklists. So think end to end. When running your security audit and thinking about your workflow, you have to think about all the points in the chain that handle your video stream. Some will be physical devices, some virtual, some literally in your hands, and many are going to be remote and in the telco or cloud domains outside of your reach. Are you absolutely certain that all those devices that the video touches are secure? How are you assured that they are secured? And if you don't have certainty, How can you design around these points of risks, right? When we're talking about video streams over IP circuits, every object in the signal path, routers, encoders, servers, they all have their own OS. And that OS might be vulnerable. Even if the video stream itself is not, the OS in which they run, that might be vulnerable. Some encoders, for instance, I'm not going to name names, but they store passwords in the clear inside the encoder. Some also have backdoors for maintenance and upgrades. Those backdoors can be exploited. And those maintenance and upgrades backdoors, they allow root access. When somebody gets into some of these encoders to that backdoor, they can potentially get access to your entire network. Let's talk about passwords. You probably know what I'm going to say here. We all do it. We use the same password in multiple devices when we're configuring, an infrastructure, because it's just easier to remember one thing. Even if that thing is a complex password, you go ahead and repeat it everywhere. Well, as you have seen the previous slides, there may be a simple way for the bad guy to get a hold of that very complicated password you're creating. They only need to break into one device that has a backdoor and which is storing the password in the clear, and suddenly they have access to all the other very secure devices that you don't want them to touch, just because you use that same password on this unsecure device. So that basically lets them roam freely through your entire network. That's not a good thing. You need to be aware of that. Physical security. Let's talk about the physical security. When thinking about it, physical security, it's easy to get bound in DRM, encryption, password hashing, and forgetting that physically protecting the equipment or the hardware device is important as well. Now, broadcasters are used to putting all the key equipment in a machine room, in the center of a building behind multiple card readers and identity checks. Very secure, right? But now we live in an era where remote production is very real, which means taking mission critical hardware out on the road. Now, in the haste to de-rig and you might leave an encoder behind, we make great play about what compact little devices our encoders are nowadays. So it's easy for them to be overlooked when you're packing and leaving. Whoever picks up that device that you left behind now has the advantage of as much time as it takes to find all the information stored inside about your configuration file. Not only they can have access to your passwords now that if they were stored in the clear, but they will have all the IP routing and addresses, which gives them attack points into your network. So physical security is just as important as, other types of security. Let's talk about virtual machines. Now, it's tempting to think that virtual machines are likely to be secure, right? You're paying for the virtual machine. It must be secure when you use it. But if you take anything from this talk is to check and double check everything. Virtual machines are often built on Linux distros like Ubuntu. And this is just open source software. There's not one point to turn for assurances to see if whatever you spun up is secure. There's also no guarantee that the hardware running your virtual machine, basically the virtualizer this is running on, has been upgraded with the latest security patches and protocols, and that the last vulnerabilities have been identified and protected against in the virtualizer and in the virtual machine itself, because it's not under your control. And don't even get me started if you're using Windows. That's just an accident waiting to happen security-wise. So SSH, the secure protocol. This is one of those standards that we tend to accept that is secure right now. It has security in the name, and it's been around for a long time. Nobody has complained about SSH hacks, right? But is that SSH server that you are running in your different operating system properly configured? If your network is breached at any point and a hacker gets a hold of a valid user, even if the valid user has absolutely no access to anything within that machine, they can use SSH relay capabilities to mount a denial of service attack against other part of your infrastructure of somebody else's. And they can do that if that SSH is configured with its default settings of relay capabilities. And most people don't know that it can do that. The SSH service is by default configured to do relay. So it might not be targeted at you, but it's certainly going to damage your reputation and make your network slower by them just using your infrastructure to do an attack on somebody else. All right, control in the context of video, right? This is another set of ancillary data that goes alongside the primary streams. Remote production brings with it the possibility of remote controlling equipment. As more and more devices are software driven, they also need to be connected, right? For upgrade, licensing, and more. Imagine you're minutes away from the headline act at a music festival and your SSL audio desk is completely reconfigured by a hacker. Or the PTC cameras are locked all on the lighting grid right before you start. So control circuits also must be regarded as a cybersecurity threat, and they must be included in your audit to make sure they're secure. OS risk. This is a very important topic, and I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this one. We talked about Linux distros so far, right? And the potential of unplugged security holes and unexpected changes in the open source origins of those operating systems. You might try to get around this by choosing a hardened version of Linux, designed for high security workloads, for example. This is a good step in the right direction, but the problem of versioning control, that's critical. An OS, as you know, Linux OS can be upgraded and patched, and then the versions of the binaries, they're all over the place. Yes, they patch this, patch that. Same with Windows. There's not a global versioning for the entire firmware. And that's a weakness of any type of OS you're going to use, unless you create your own Linux flavor and you control versioning. You manage it as if it was the old firmware concept, where the firmware is an overall version of many binaries that make up that OS. So as an industry, we can make that type of OS work for specifically media instead of a generic OS that is built for many things. Why would we need a printer driver for an OS that's doing video streaming, for example? Now, we take all the things out of it that we don't need. The structure of such an OS could then be rolled out to standard computers and embedded within devices like encoders, server, decoder, edge devices, and have it under your control 100%. Let's talk about self-hosting, right? This is going to seem like a revolutionary suggestion nowadays because we have gotten used to the idea of turning to AWS or Azure or Google to provide our storage and processor requirements. They are the Walmart of computing, always there with whatever you need. You don't think, right? You just go to your nearest store, you spin up whatever you need. But today's disk drives, SSDs, and processors are cheap. Whereas once you had to pay especially a lot of money to get enterprise-grade performance, now it is not difficult to build your own. You could put your own server hub in your office, put the disaster recovery site in another office across town, or perhaps more realistically, rent some rack space in a data center. So hosting your own service means there is no difficulty in electing to use a specialist proprietary OS under your control to discourage hackers. You can incorporate it into all your communications. You can use specialty service rather than a domestic grade service like Zoom or Teams. Just set up your own private communications infrastructure. And you can have performance highly tuned for the needs of your media transport and make it very efficient. So you could respond to this statement as a question like, but surely you need a CDN, right, to manage delivery to a large number of users, right? I cannot do it on my own. Well, actually, smart design and today's protocol allow you to deliver content without a traditional CDN. CDNs existed because TCP protocol had limitations. With UDP, you can now do broadcast streaming with tightly integrating security and encryption, low processing demand, and you can do it directly from one single point and transmit it all over the world without the need to really relay that to local hubs and local edge points and caching and all that type of thing. So I'm going to talk about a specific use case, NBC Universal, where we applied all these security concepts, including the creation or the use of a custom operating system for them. So, I'm not going to play all the details of what we did there, but rather how we applied these concepts. So they needed to be able to share content between producers and executive. Initially, across its three main hubs, Los Angeles, New York, and London. It had to be a genuine sharing, right? Content from any hub had to be available to users anywhere. And the applications vary from uncompressed to very lightly compressed for delivery to the ability to watch viewing copies of those streams on any browser. Each hub can take very large numbers of SMPTE 2110 MPEG-TS or SDI feeds simultaneously. Importantly, the encoders carry everything from the source, meaning all the ancillary data, the clock, the PTP, it all had to be transferred from the source to the destination viewer to be able to share this content properly. Uncompressed transfers were rare because, the viewer can be anywhere, so we use H.264 for most of the compression. So we use a custom OS, and we created an entire distribution system that was able to grab the source and distribute it everywhere with AES encryption using RIST. We did RIST on the mask and the source, media server relays. The relays would send the data to a web browser using WebRTC or to custom set-top boxes that we created for them, also with the same custom OS that were bringing down the data and using RIST. So it was an end-to-end control environment with encryption, and the solution had to be vetted with full cybersecurity reviews as well, being that it was now spanning the entire network. And the security review lasted 6 months, 2 different firms. And at the end, we created a solution exactly what they wanted, from anywhere to anywhere through a web browser, 1,300 sources, basically. We did another use case with the Super Bowl where we transmitting video inside the stadium to 60 endpoints, all the VIP booth, plus the commentator boxes. And again, security was paramount here and low latency. Low latency, we use the UDP and the RISC protocol. Security, we use encryption and end-to-end custom OS all the way throughout the infrastructure. So the system or the video streams never left the scope of being inside a control environment, an audited OS and an application, basically. So this is just, I was there. So there you go. I hope that if you take anything out of this is that it's okay to be paranoid about security. I've put a QR code for a security audit if you want to run it within your own infrastructure. It's a starting point set of questions to ask your guys. Do we think about these things when we do a transmission within our infrastructure? And I want to leave a couple of minutes for questions if there are any. Thank you.